So
Yeah.
given your background with evolutionary biology, what's your take on that social contagion aspect of people now like self-identifying as, I guess it's specifically with young girls too, like identifying as male?
Yeah, I mean it's both males and females, but the ratio has flipped. It used to be mostly males that would claim to have gender dysphoria or exhibit signs for gender dysphoria.
Hmm.
There's been a huge uptick in both males and females generally,
Hmm.
but the prevalence has sort of flipped, where it's now almost. I mean, it's majority female young girls who are claiming to identify as male now. But I mean, the whole "when sons become daughters" thing we're doing in Quillette is actually addressing sort of a much overlooked aspect, and that is the males that are also having that sort of rapid onset gender dysphoria um, sort of ideology,
Mm.
which is concerning because Abigail Schreier, she does amazing work, and her book Irreversible Damage is fantastic. It does focus on young girls, and I think that's a proper thing to focus on. But I mean, it's not just young girls that's happening in, and so it's good that we're seeing sort of everyone getting addressed right now.
Hmm.
Social contagion is something that is happens all the time. I mean, we'll talk to I'll talk to these trans rights activists, and they'll say this can't be a social contagion because who would want to identify in something that an oppressed category and things. But there's documented evidence of social contagion happening with things like suicide. Like, what could
Oh
be
my God,
more
yeah.
anti-evolutionary or beneficial to you than killing yourself?
Hmm.
And so, like this, it's not something that's merely related to things that it's not like a fad of beneficial things. I mean, these can be um, they can be things that are harmful to yourself. It can be things that signal sort of social inclusivity, or I always think if we seem to be in a time now where we have such a heaping a lot of praise on sort of people for claiming to be victims and things.
Hmm.
Well, it's not a really big surprise that you will see people that are sort of identifying into categories that are widely viewed as oppressed. So um, I think we need to talk about social contagion more. This is sort of Lisa Littman's work. She's the one uh, who first had the study on rapid onset gender dysphoria. I know she's doing more follow up studies, but a lot of the activists claims that she only talked to parents and she didn't actually interview the kids themselves. And so she tried to do follow up study and had it based on the kids in these surveys. And then all the activists just bombarded her poll and ruined her study. So they claim that they want better data, but then
But
they
then they
just
sabotage
ruined
it.
the study they try to do. So she has to go this other route where she has to, you know, gather the data much more covertly and not have it just be this big public thing. So yeah, it's something we need to study. And me claiming it was a social contagion, or even just offering it up as a possibility, is what led to like a lot of people who tried to cancel me, like about a year ago. Uh, calling departments ahead of time and telling them I'm such a horrible person, because they said I was, comparing trans people to viruses or something like that. Where, it's the field of social contagion is not controversial. It's something that is documented widely with a wide range of phenomenon.
Hmm.
So it's just something they don't like to hear because their their narrative is that it's not social contagion. It's just greater societal acceptance. That's the only reason that people are kind of coming out in droves. But it's weird that you only see people coming out who are like of this demographic, like Gen Z and some millennials. You don't get like these 50-year-olds that are coming out as trans now that the environment's better, which you would probably expect.
Hmm.
Um, and you also have like this increase in suicide rates too in general. So which seems to be not completely interpretable with this greater acceptance if we still see
Hmm.
people uh, committing suicide at such high rates.
Yeah.
So
So when
so
it
yeah,
comes,
it's a big
sorry to
mess.
cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm done. It's a mess. That's all I'm saying.
So when it comes to social contagion, like a male adaptive contagion like suicide, have you done any research with that? Because to me, I mean, it's horrific, but it's like shockingly fascinating. Like how does that There was a state, I think it was Arizona, was it, that during the lockdowns they saw like a huge uptick. It was like one community got just absolutely rocked with their kids, just all of them killing themselves. So it was like just boom, 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 boom,
Mm-hmm.
boom. You didn't really hear about it a lot about it on the news, but I was listening to a podcast that was mentioning it, and it's so. I just don't understand how by one person doing it, it kind of like sparks that, I guess, need or possibility in someone else, and then it just keeps on going. I don't know if you can explain maybe why that happened, or like happens
Yeah.
psychologically or biologically.
Unfortunately, I'm not too familiar with that. I know someone who's really good on that, who studies that specifically, is Nicholas Christakis. He's done a lot of work on social contagion, and he was
Yeah.
even talking on Twitter about how this isn't even the first time that like gender dysphoria has been a social contagion. So that's actually something I would love to chat with him about, that, because I wasn't aware of like a previous iteration of the whole gender dysphoria contagion that I think he said took place in the 90s or something, which would be fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So he's someone that you should get on for that, because he's just an amazingly fascinating person,
I
super
just wrote
brilliant.
that down. Yeah, I'm gonna have to, because to me that's just so fascinating. I think it might have been Deborah that was explaining like her theory on it. So she was, and I hope it was Deborah, not someone else. But she was saying that is specifically with women or like young girls, it spreads a little bit faster, whether it's like a gender dysphoria issue or gender identity issue, or whether it was a body dysmorphic issue, eating disorders, all of that, just because girls tend to talk more about what's going wrong with them. And then we just kind of start to see, I don't know, like whole friend groups start to, I guess, like suffer those consequences. And then she was saying that it was kind of like the new punk rock. So being non-binary is like the new goth or the new punk rock. So it's just like a way to express like your rebellion against the culture, which I thought was really interesting because I don't think anyone else has kind
Yeah,
of given that analogy. And to me, it makes sense. Like we all go through, or most of us go through that rebellious stage where like, screw you, mom, you don't understand, and, screw the government and whatever. Like you just go through that angry like phase, which is fine. And if it is a phase for some people, I think it wouldn't be an issue if we weren't medically intervening. But that's where we start to get the hang up. And then you have the misinformation that it's not permanent and that you can reverse it. And from all of the professionals I've talked to or read about, they say quite the opposite.
yeah. It's that intermingling with the whole medical aspect that's the most concerning. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I could totally see, those the emo kids who previously just were gauging their ears and all that stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
that sort of behavior is now like, I mean, if you look at a lot of the people who claim to be sort of non-binary, uh, this is just my idea. These seem to be like, yeah, I think a lot of the kids who used to be emo would have probably, if they were growing up right now, would probably be the non-binary kids. But instead of gauging their ears, they're just sort of dressing androgynously and trying to get hormones or puberty blockers and things like that.